she was the villain. She was the third person in the marriage. She needed to rehabilitate her image.
The iron gates of Kensington Palace remained firmly shut on Tuesday morning, turning away a royal courier sent directly by the Queen. Inside those walls, Prince William had just made a decision that would shatter the fragile peace of the royal family. He has officially blocked Queen Camilla from accessing Princess Diana's historic legacy collection. This is not just a disagreement over diamonds. It is an open rebellion against the king himself. The fight for Diana's memory has officially turned into a war for the future of the crown. The empty silk pocket. The heavy oak doors of the basement wardrobe room at Kensington Palace do not usually creak, but on Tuesday morning, the silence made every sound louder. A senior royal dresser pulled a velvet-lined case from the secure safe. She expected to find the three-tiered diamond and pearl necklace that Princess Diana wore to her final public engagement in 1997. Instead, the custom-molded blue silk pocket sat empty. A small typed inventory card rested in its place, stamped with the personal seal of the Prince of Wales. William had personally authorized the removal of the entire collection less than 12 hours earlier. This was not a standard rotation of the royal jewelry archive. The dresser immediately notified the master of the household at Buckingham Palace, who bypassed standard protocol to call King Charles directly. Within an hour, a motorcycle courier left the king's private residence holding a heavy cream envelope. The handwritten letter inside did not address William by his formal titles. Charles wrote 3 short sentences on his personal stationery, demanding the immediate return of the items to the central vault before the weekend. William read the note at his desk, folded it twice, and placed it inside his jacket pocket without replying. The timing of this standoff turned a private family dispute into an active constitutional problem. In exactly 4 days, the British government will host a massive state dinner for visiting European leaders. Protocol dictates that the Queen must wear historical pieces that reflect the absolute authority of the British crown. Camilla had specifically requested the Spencer family pieces to complement her official wardrobe for the night. Her styling team had spent weeks coordinating fabrics and colors around those specific stones. Now, those plans were entirely useless. William's staff remained entirely silent when Buckingham Palace officials demanded an explanation. The Prince of Wales did not use his communications team to handle the fallout. He chose to manage the situation through his private legal advisors, who operate outside the standard palace press office. This move effectively cut off the king's senior aides from their usual methods of internal diplomacy. They could not use quiet pressure when dealing with a separate legal entity. The central mystery remained hidden from the public press corps waiting outside the gates. No one could pinpoint exactly where the physical diamonds were being held. Some staffers whispered that the vault at Windsor Castle had been secured under a new security code. Others believed the jewelry had already left London entirely, moved to a secure bank vault in the countryside. The king needed to know the location before he could take any official steps to reclaim them. A breakthrough came through an internal audit of the palace transport logs from Monday evening. A secure vehicle assigned to William's personal security detail had made a single, uncharacteristic stop at a private storage facility near Heathrow Airport. The vehicle remained on the premises for exactly 11 minutes before returning to Kensington Palace. The diamonds were no longer on royal property, placing them completely outside the jurisdiction of the king's household staff. William had successfully removed the physical leverage his father held. With the first mystery regarding the location solved, a much larger question surfaced within the palace walls. Charles knew that his son would not risk an open war over a simple dispute about fashion. This defensive move pointed toward a much deeper strategy regarding the upcoming transition of power. If William could successfully lock the current queen out of the historical archive today, he could alter the visual identity of the monarchy tomorrow. The king now faced a choice between escalating the fight publicly or forcing Camilla to back down before the state dinner. The pressure inside Buckingham Palace intensified as the clock neared midday. Camilla refused to adjust her wardrobe choice, viewing William's action as a direct insult to her position as queen consort. She reminded Charles that the public image of the monarchy relied on a unified front during international visits. A missing heirloom would spark immediate speculation among royal commentators worldwide. The press would notice the absence within seconds of her arrival at the gala. William remained dug in at Adelaide Cottage, refusing to take phone calls from the king's private secretary. He made it clear through his lawyers that certain items from his mother's collection were never intended for general use by subsequent generations. He viewed himself as the ultimate guardian of that specific visual legacy. The legal basis for his defiance rested on a private agreement drafted during his parents' divorce proceedings in the late 1990s. Charles now had to consider his options carefully. He could use his authority as sovereign to issue a royal warrant, forcing the return of the property under Crown law. However, such a move would require exposing the internal rift to the government and potentially the media. The risk of a public scandal during a high-profile state visit was too high. The king needed a way to break the deadlock without triggering an administrative crisis that could damage the reputation of the entire family. A silent escalation at Clarence House. The private study at Clarence House remained brightly lit long past midnight on Wednesday evening. King Charles sat behind his mahogany desk, staring at a piece of heavy parchment that dated back to 1997. This document was the original schedule of property attached to Princess Diana's final divorce settlement. It detailed exactly which pieces of jewelry belonged to the state and which were designated as personal heirlooms for her sons. William's legal team had sent a certified photocopy of this exact text to the king's private secretary just 3 hours earlier. A small red checkmark had been hand-drawn next to the items currently missing from the Kensington Palace vault. This sudden legal maneuver paralyzed the standard operations of the royal household. Typically, the master of the jewel house manages the movement of historic pieces between various royal residences. He operates under direct orders from the sovereign. However, William's lawyers uncovered a specific administrative loophole created during the restructuring of the royal collection in the late 90s. The document stated that personal items worn regularly by Diana required joint consent from her executors before being reassigned for use by a stepmother. Charles had forgotten this specific clause, but his eldest son had clearly studied it for months. Camilla entered the study shortly before 1 in the morning, holding a revised seating chart for the upcoming European summit dinner. Her senior dresser had already confirmed that the backup tiara, a smaller piece from the late Queen Mother's collection, would not fit the neckline of the custom gown. The visual branding of the evening relied heavily on the specific sapphire set that William had locked away near Heathrow. To change the jewelry now meant changing the dress, which would alter the official photographs already cleared by the Foreign Office. Camilla set the paperwork down on the desk without speaking, her silence conveying more pressure than any verbal argument could. The king picked up his telephone and attempted to dial the direct secure line to Adelaide Cottage. The call rang 4 times before transferring automatically to an automated answering service managed by the Royal Protection Command. William was on the estate, but he had explicitly instructed his security detail to filter all incoming communications through his principal private secretary. This was a deliberate structural barrier. By forcing the king to communicate through staff, William transformed a family dispute into a formal institutional standoff. A quiet investigation by the palace internal security team revealed that William had not acted entirely alone. On Wednesday afternoon, a senior clerk at a prominent London law firm that historically represented the Spencer family had logged into the Royal Archives digital database. This clerk had downloaded the exact probate records of the late Princess of Wales. The digital footprint traced back to an IP address registered to an office building in Westminster, used by William's personal financial advisors. The Prince of Wales had systematically built his legal case weeks before he physically removed the diamonds from the safe. The immediate mystery facing the king's inner circle was whether Prince Harry had been briefed on this sudden embargo. If the Duke of Sussex opposed the move, the king could use Harry's co-executor status to invalidate William's veto. A senior courtier was tasked with making discreet contact with the Sussex legal representatives in California. The palace needed to know if the brothers were acting in unison or if William was running a solitary campaign to protect his mother's style legacy. The answer arrived via an unexpected administrative route at 2 in the morning. An encrypted email from a legal firm in Los Angeles landed in the inbox of the keeper of the Privy Purse. The text was brief but devastating for Buckingham Palace. It stated that the Duke of Sussex had formally delegated his discretionary authority regarding the Spencer heirloom collection to his brother for the remainder of the current calendar year. The brothers had formed a temporary alliance. Despite their deep public estrangement, their shared determination to keep their mother's signature pieces away from Camilla had overridden their personal differences. This revelation changed the nature of the crisis completely. Charles could no longer frame William's actions as an isolated act of stubbornness or a momentary lapse in protocol. The two brothers had combined their legal rights to create an absolute blockade. The king was now looking at a unified front from Diana's children, a scenario that his advisors had always assured him would never happen due to the ongoing rift between London and California. Outside the study, the rain began to hit the windows of Clarence House as the clock struck 3. Charles knew that if he forced the issue by challenging the 1997 agreement in court, the media would gain access to the raw text of the divorce files. Those documents contained sensitive personal statements that both sides had agreed to bury forever. The potential damage to the monarchy's public standing during an international summit was far too high a price to pay for a single state dinner appearance. William's counter-strategy had been executed with clinical precision. He had chosen a moment of maximum diplomatic pressure, secured his brother's legal cooperation without triggering a public leak, and moved the physical assets off royal property. The Prince of Wales was no longer just waiting for his inheritance. He was actively demonstrating that he already controlled the visual narrative of the House of Windsor. The king was left with less than 48 hours to find a compromise that would save face for Camilla without exposing the total breakdown of his authority to the visiting heads of state. Bloodlines and broken promises. The legal archive in the basement of Windsor Castle holds documents that rarely see the light of day. On Thursday morning, a senior archivist retrieved a heavy leather binder containing the final annexes of Princess Diana's 1997 probate files. This was not a public copy. It was the original, restricted text detailing the precise division of her personal effects. William's legal team had spent the early hours of the morning highlighting a specific overlooked clause on page 42. The text clearly stated that while certain items were held in perpetuity for future state occasions, the physical custody of her personal style legacy remained strictly under the control of her named executors. William was only a teenager when he was integrated into the management of that estate. Now, as the Prince of Wales, he chose to exercise a little-known veto power buried within those papers. The document stipulated that any reassignment of her signature jewelry pieces for a non-lineal descendant required explicit written authorization from her eldest son. By invoking this clause, William was not just managing an archive, he was establishing a legal boundary between his mother's memory and his stepmother's current institutional role. The immediate effect of this filing was a complete freeze on the movement of the Spencer collection. The master of the jewel house could not legally override a direct executor order without risking a formal breach of trust. This placed the king's advisors in a position where they could no longer rely on standard palace authority to resolve the matter. They were dealing with a private estate matter that sat entirely outside the jurisdiction of crown law. Behind the closed doors of Clarence House, the king's private secretary reviewed the original deed of variation that had been signed after Diana's passing. The document was intended to protect the family from public tax disputes, but it had effectively created a legal fortress around her personal property. William's lawyers had spent months quietly studying these specific provisions before launching their current challenge. They knew the exact boundaries of the king's administrative reach. The legal team noted that the 1997 agreement specifically separated state-owned regalia from personal gifts. The sapphire collection and the three-tiered pearl necklace fell squarely into the private category. Because these items had been gifted to Diana personally during her tenure as Princess of Wales, they did not automatically revert to the Central Crown Archive upon her divorce. They remained tied to her private trust, which William now controlled with absolute authority. This reality left the king with very few options. He could not simply order his security detail to seize the items from the storage facility near Heathrow Airport. To do so would mean violating a legally binding private trust, an action that would invite immediate intervention from outside courts. The constitutional crisis was no longer a theoretical threat. It was a practical barrier preventing the Queen from fulfilling her scheduled visual role at the upcoming gala. While the lawyers argued over the wording of the 1997 text, a more complicated dynamic began to emerge regarding the executor framework. The original setup required a joint consensus for major asset decisions, which usually meant both brothers had to be in alignment. This structural detail opened a significant vulnerability for the palace, and Charles's advisors immediately sought to exploit it. If Prince Harry chose to challenge his brother's unilateral block from across the Atlantic, the king could potentially use that division to invalidate the veto entirely. The king's private secretary immediately initiated a secure communication link with a legal firm in London that handles the Duke of Sussex's European affairs. The palace needed to determine whether the younger brother would support William's hardline stance, or if the deep personal rift between London and Montecito would cause Harry to stay out of the dispute entirely. If Harry refused to sign the veto, William's legal argument would collapse before the afternoon print deadline. The tension inside the private secretary's office grew as they waited for the time zone difference to catch up with the crisis. Every hour brought the state dinner closer, and the Foreign Office was already demanding confirmation on the final photographic protocols for the arriving dignitaries. The balance of the entire weekend's diplomacy now depended on an encrypted response from an office building in Santa Barbara, where Harry's representatives were currently reviewing the palace's urgent inquiry. Senior courtiers believed that Harry's well-documented resentment toward the palace apparatus might work in the king's favor this time. They reasoned that the Duke of Sussex would not want William to take sole credit for managing their mother's legacy. A quiet offer was made through intermediate channels, suggesting that the king would look favorably on certain outstanding security requests if Harry agreed to remain neutral in the jewelry dispute. This was a direct attempt to split the brothers' interests and break the legal deadlock. However, the strategy ignored the deep emotional weight attached to the physical objects in question. For both brothers, the Spencer collection represented the most tangible link to their late mother's public identity. Every photograph of her wearing those specific stones was etched into the public consciousness. William's legal team remained confident that their position would hold, regardless of any back-channel negotiations taking place between Buckingham Palace and California. By early afternoon, the legal battle lines had frozen. William remained at Adelaide Cottage, receiving regular updates from his legal team via secure digital links. He had deliberately chosen to fight this battle on the strict ground of estate law, rather than personal emotion. This clinical approach made it much harder for the king's advisors to appeal to his sense of royal duty or institutional loyalty. The Prince of Wales was acting as a trustee protecting an asset, not a son arguing with his father. The silence from the California legal team became increasingly problematic for the palace as the day progressed. The absence of an immediate rejection from Harry signaled that the situation was far more complex than the king's advisors had initially assumed. If the two brothers had actually coordinated this move in secret, the palace was facing a unified front that could permanently alter how the family's private history is managed in the modern era. The upcoming gala crisis. The dress rehearsal inside the ballroom at Buckingham Palace came to a sudden halt at 2 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. A senior wardrobe assistant stood beside a headless mannequin, holding an empty hanger where the official state gown was supposed to be displayed. The fabric, a deep navy silk woven specifically to match the tones of Princess Diana's sapphire collection, looked flat under the harsh fluorescent work lights. Without the matching stones, the entire visual presentation for the International Summit dinner lacked the historical weight required for such a high-profile diplomatic event. The master of the household stood at the edge of the stage, his telephone pressed firmly to his ear. He was receiving an update from the transport office, confirming that the security van containing the alternative royal jewelry sets had just entered the palace gates. This alternative collection, comprised of lesser-known pieces from the late Queen Mother's private estate, was structurally smaller and completely different in style. The change meant that the palace tailors had less than 30 hours to completely unpick and restitch the shoulders of the Queen's gown to accommodate a completely different necklace shape. The tension quickly spread beyond the wardrobe department and into the diplomatic planning offices. The Foreign Office had spent nearly 6 months coordinating the seating arrangements and photographic protocols with the visiting European heads of state. The official portraits, which were scheduled to be distributed to global media outlets immediately upon the guests' arrival, were designed around a specific theme of continuity and crown authority. Queen Camilla, appearing in modified clothing and non-traditional jewelry, would send an immediate subtle signal of domestic instability to the sharp-eyed foreign diplomats. A quiet panic filled the administrative corridors as officials realized that the visiting royal family from Denmark had already landed at Heathrow Airport. Their protocol team had requested a final confirmation of the jewelry selections to ensure their own monarch's tiara would not clash with Camilla's choice. This standard diplomatic courtesy became an administrative nightmare for the palace staff. They could not provide an accurate answer without admitting that the king did not currently have access to his own family's historical vault. The immediate mystery for the king's inner circle was determining exactly how much information had leaked to the visiting diplomatic delegations. If a foreign embassy learned that the Prince of Wales had locked the Queen out of the collection, the political narrative of the entire summit would shift from international trade to internal royal dysfunction. The palace chief of staff ordered an immediate review of all digital communications sent to external protocol offices over the past 48 hours to identify any unusual leaks. The review of the diplomatic cables resolved the micro-mystery by mid-afternoon, but the findings only heightened the internal anxiety. A routine confirmation note from the Danish embassy contained a specific phrase thanking the palace for clarifying that historical Spencer heirlooms would not be featured in the official photographs. This detail meant that someone within the British government's own hospitality team had quietly tipped off the foreign visitors about the change before the palace had even finalized the alternative wardrobe. The circle of people aware of William's blockade was expanding rapidly beyond the palace walls. With the leak confirmed, a much larger operational problem took precedence. The king had to decide whether to officially order Camilla to wear the alternative pieces or to make one final, aggressive attempt to break William's legal hold before the Friday deadline. Accepting the alternative jewelry meant publicly acknowledging that the Prince of Wales held a functional veto over the current Queen's public appearance. It was a precedent that Charles's senior advisors warned could permanently damage the authority of his reign. Camilla remained entirely composed but completely firm during a private meeting with the wardrobe team in her personal apartments. She refused to allow the tailors to alter the original gown, stating that a last-minute structural change would look desperate to the waiting press corps. She suggested a different approach. If William refused to release the Diana collection, she would attend the state dinner wearing no historical jewelry at all, opting instead for a simple modern gold set. This choice would send a direct, visible message to the public that something was seriously wrong behind the scenes, forcing William to bear the public scrutiny for the missing history. The king's private secretary spent the remaining hours of the afternoon drafting a final compromise proposal to be sent via secure courier to Adelaide Cottage. The document offered to limit Camilla's use of the Spencer collection strictly to the official arrival photographs, promising that the items would be returned to William's representatives immediately before the dinner began. It was a major concession that effectively granted William the ultimate ownership rights he was claiming, but it was the only way to save the palace's immediate diplomatic presentation. As the sun began to set over London, the courier departed Buckingham Palace carrying the new terms. The wardrobe assistants could only wait in the darkened ballroom, leaving the navy gown untouched on its mannequin. The entire visual legacy of the modern British monarchy was now suspended in a delicate balance, waiting to see if the Prince of Wales would accept his father's compromise or allow the Queen to step out into the global spotlight completely unadorned. Harry's unexpected phone call. The secure communications terminal inside the private office at Adelaide Cottage emitted a low, rhythmic chime at exactly 8 o'clock on Thursday evening. Prince William stepped away from his desk and pressed the authorization key on the encrypted console. The digital readout displayed an international routing code originating from a secure server framework in Southern California. This was not a routine administrative connection through the royal switchboard. It was a direct, peer-to-peer line that had been established specifically to bypass the telecommunications monitoring systems managed by the Palace Security Branch at Windsor. The voice that came through the speaker was instantly familiar, stripped of the formal cadence usually reserved for public broadcasts. Prince Harry did not open the conversation with family pleasantries or inquiries about the ongoing legal standoff in London. Instead, he immediately confirmed that his legal representatives in Los Angeles had just rejected a direct back-channel offer from the King's private secretary. The palace had attempted to buy Harry's neutrality by offering to revisit his outstanding security arrangements in the United Kingdom. Harry had refused to sign the paperwork, solidifying the brothers' joint veto power over their mother's legacy collection. This conversation marked the first time the two brothers had spoken directly without intermediaries since the funeral of their grandmother. The shared determination to protect Princess Diana's material possessions from being integrated into Queen Camilla's official wardrobe had overridden 2 years of intense personal and public estrangement. William listened quietly as Harry detailed the exact language his American lawyers had used to freeze the palace's countermaneuver. The alliance was entirely transactional, built on a shared emotional boundary that neither brother was willing to let the institution cross. The immediate operational mystery for William's team was whether the palace would try to bypass the California proxy by appealing directly to the High Court on Friday morning. If the king's lawyers filed an emergency administrative injunction, they might find a judge willing to grant temporary custody of the jewelry for the duration of the state visit. William needed to know if Harry's legal team had already prepared a counter-filing to block any sudden movements in the British court system. The window for legal maneuvering was shrinking rapidly as the midnight deadline approached. Harry resolved the mystery by confirming that a senior barrister from their mother's original estate law firm had been placed on formal retainer in London since Tuesday afternoon. This barrister held a signed affidavit from both brothers, ready to be submitted to the clerk of the court the moment Buckingham Palace attempted to file any emergency paperwork. The legal trap was completely set. The palace could not take a single administrative step without triggering an open public courtroom battle that would expose the raw details of the 1997 divorce settlement to the global press. With the legal perimeter fully secured, a much larger question emerged regarding how the brothers would handle the inevitable media fallout once the state dinner commenced. The British press corps was already asking questions about the security movements near Heathrow Airport, and the absence of the sapphire collection would be obvious the moment the Queen entered the ballroom. William had to decide whether to allow the media to speculate wildly or to issue a controlled, neutral statement that would settle the narrative on their own terms. Harry strongly advocated for total public silence, arguing that any statement from their offices would give the palace an opportunity to frame the dispute as an act of familial spite rather than a legitimate defense of a private estate. He pointed out that the visual absence of the jewels would speak louder than any press release. The global audience would instantly understand that the Spencer family heritage remained firmly in the hands of her sons, completely separate from the current management of the crown. William agreed with the assessment, deciding to let the lawyers handle all formal communications through restricted institutional channels. The call lasted for exactly 14 minutes before the secure connection automatically terminated to prevent digital tracking by external intelligence networks. William sat in the quiet office for several moments, looking at the glowing terminal screen. The temporary alliance with his brother had effectively paralyzed the king's administrative options, but it also underscored the profound fragmentation of the modern royal family. To protect the past, the two brothers had been forced to operate like corporate rivals, using international legal frameworks to check the authority of their own father. Outside the cottage, the evening fog began to settle over the lawns of the Windsor estate, cutting off the house from the main castle complex. William's principal private secretary entered the room, holding the final draft of the reply to the king's compromise proposal. The Prince of Wales picked up his fountain pen and drew a single, clean line through the palace's offer to return the jewelry immediately after the arrival photographs. He would not accept a partial victory. He signed his name at the bottom of the rejection page, sealing the decision that would leave the Queen completely unadorned at the biggest diplomatic event of the year. Charles draws a line in the sand. The emergency midnight meeting inside the King's private office at Clarence House began without the usual introductory formalities. King Charles stood by the window, watching the rain slick the courtyard stones, while his chief financial advisor opened a leather-bound ledger on the central table. The rejection note from Adelaide Cottage had arrived less than an hour earlier, confirming William's absolute refusal to accept the photographic compromise. The king had exhausted his administrative options through the Royal Collection Trust. He now turned to the only structural lever he had left. He ordered an immediate audit of the discretionary funding allocations managed under the Duchy of Cornwall. The Duchy of Cornwall provides the primary income for the Prince of Wales, generating tens of millions of pounds annually for William's household and public operations. While the estate's capital is legally protected, certain surplus revenues and developmental grants require ultimate sovereign sign-off before distribution. Charles's advisors spent 40 minutes detailing a specific fiscal mechanism that would allow the king to freeze a substantial portion of these upcoming capital improvements. It was a direct financial warning shot designed to show William that his independence came with a measurable institutional cost. The immediate mystery for the Treasury team was whether William had anticipated a financial counterstrike when he initiated the jewelry embargo. If the Prince of Wales had already restructured his household accounts, the threat of a funding freeze would lose its immediate leverage. The keeper of the privy purse initiated a digital review of the duchy's recent banking transfers to see if any large capital reserves had been shifted into private, unrestricted accounts over the previous month. The digital audit resolved the micro-mystery within minutes, revealing that William had quietly moved significant private assets out of the Central Estate Fund back in late April. He had established an independent contingency fund through a private banking firm in London, entirely outside the king's administrative reach. The Prince of Wales had systematically insulated his family's daily operations from any sudden financial sanctions his father might impose. The financial lever was effectively useless, proving that William had planned for every possible escalation scenario weeks in advance. With the financial strategy neutralized, the macro loop regarding the brothers' coordination reached its final resolution. The Treasury team confirmed that Harry's legal representatives had formally registered their support for William's estate management plan, ensuring that the brothers' joint veto power over the Spencer collection remained legally unassailable. The alliance between London and California was complete, creating an absolute administrative bloc that the king could not dismantle without a public constitutional crisis. Charles closed the ledger himself, signaling the end of the meeting. He realized that pursuing a financial or legal war against his own children on the eve of an international summit would only accelerate the damage to the monarchy's public standing. The king had to accept the reality that his authority had its limits when confronted by a unified front from Diana's sons. He instructed his private secretary to cancel any further legal filings and directed the wardrobe team to prepare the alternative, modern gold jewelry set for Queen Camilla's appearance the following evening. The new reality of royal power. The grand ballroom at Buckingham Palace glistened under the weight of 1,000 crystal chandeliers on Friday evening. As the heavy oak doors swung open, the first wave of European diplomats and heads of state walked down the receiving line. The global media pack stood packed behind the velvet ropes, their long lenses focused entirely on the head of the room. King Charles stood beside Queen Camilla, greeting the arriving dignitaries with the practiced smile of a seasoned sovereign. Within seconds, the first flashbulbs went off, and the images began flashing to newsrooms across the globe. The reaction from the international press was immediate and intense. Royal fashion commentators and political journalists noticed the glaring absence around Queen Camilla's neck before she had even finished greeting the Danish delegation. Instead of the historic glittering blue stones of the Princess Diana Sapphire collection, Camilla wore a minimalist, modern gold set. It was elegant, but it carried absolutely none of the deep historic weight usually reserved for a major British state dinner. To the untrained eye, it was a simple style choice. To the courtiers standing in the shadows of the ballroom, it was a public declaration of total defeat. The Prince of Wales arrived precisely 4 minutes after the king, walking into the room with an air of absolute calm. He wore his formal dress uniform, his posture completely relaxed as he mingled with the foreign ambassadors. He did not look toward his father, nor did he make eye contact with his stepmother. He had executed his strategy with clinical, boardroom precision, and the visual evidence of his victory was now being broadcast live to millions of screens worldwide. This moment marked a permanent shift in the internal balance of power within the House of Windsor. For decades, the reigning sovereign held unquestioned control over the public image and material assets of the family. By successfully blocking the Queen from accessing the Spencer collection, William proved that the next generation already commands a functional veto over the current reign. He had drawn a firm, legal boundary around his mother's memory, and the king had been forced to back down in full view of the international community. The deeper reality of this standoff was the silent alliance that made it possible. Across the Atlantic, the Duke of Sussex remained completely silent, but his legal proxy had provided the definitive weight that crushed the palace's counter-strategy. The two brothers had found a way to combine their legal rights to check their father's authority, creating a precedent that will shape the monarchy for decades to come. The institutional fortress had been breached from within, not by an outside scandal, but by the very children Charles had raised to protect it. As the state dinner progressed into the late evening, the initial tension in the room dissolved into standard diplomatic chatter. The king and his heir kept their distance, navigating separate sides of the ballroom with the careful choreography of two rival heads of state. The monarchy had survived the immediate diplomatic crisis without a public shouting match or an open courtroom battle, but the internal landscape had changed forever. William had shown that he is no longer just waiting to inherit the crown. He is already actively defining exactly how its history will be preserved. The battle for Princess Diana's legacy has revealed a brand new reality behind palace doors, proving that Prince William holds the ultimate power over the future of the royal image.